In a recent airing of The View, tensions reached a boiling point when Wanda Sykes erupted after a heated exchange with Joy Behar. The studio, typically a space for spirited but civil debate, buzzed with palpable tension. What began as a discussion over comedic boundaries and political satire soon devolved into sharp words, raised voices, and emotional rebuttals. Viewers could sense that the conversation had crossed from disagreement into personal confrontation. In the moment, Sykes seemed pushed to a breaking point, her composure giving way to indignation as she challenged Behar's assertions with force and resolve. The clash began innocuously enough. The hosts were debating the limits of comedic license when Sykes, known for her incisive wit, made a comment about how comics must navigate the fine line between biting satire and outright offense. Behar, ever the provocateur, pushed back, suggesting that certain topics are sacrosanct and not open to comedic treatment. The exchange grew more confrontational as Behar questioned Sykes's judgment, forcing Sykes to defend her principles in front of a live audience. In that moment, the delicate balance between humor and respect lapsed, and the tension snapped. As the conversation escalated, Sykes and Behar traded barbs. Behar's tone sharpened, implying that Sykes was being inconsiderate to certain sensitivities. Sykes, visibly frustrated, retorted that comedy must hold space for discomfort, that the role of a satirist is to probe, to provoke even if it unsettles. Behar interrupted, accusing Sykes of flippancy. That interruption, Sykes later implied, was the ignition point. Feeling cut off, silenced, and dismissed, she launched into her rebuttal with intensity. Wanda Sykes's voice, ordinarily calm and measured, rose in pitch as she articulated the stakes. She pressed Behar, "Is it your place to say what's off limits for every person?" She challenged the assertion that certain topics were beyond discussion, arguing instead that society advances by confronting discomfort, not suppressing it. At that juncture, her frustration was evident and her words came quicker, more forceful, as she stated a position not just for comedy, but for free expression. Behar, taken aback, attempted to regain control of the floor. She countered that freedom doesn't absolve responsibility, suggesting that humor can and should be constrained by empathy. But Sykes wasn't backing down. She accused Behar of conflating offense with harm, of delegitimizing voices that push boundaries. The room seemed to hold its breath as both women dug into their convictions, unwilling to yield dissent. There was a moment in which Sykes paused, taking a breath, then steeled herself, eyes flashing. She laid out a personal anecdote, moments in her own life when humor was her shield, her means of reclamation. She painted a portrait of a comedian not seeking to wound, but to challenge, to open reflection. Behar responded by evoking the value of holding certain spaces sacred, but Sykes held firm, asserting that sacredness must evolve, that no subject should remain forever untouchable. As the exchange persisted, another host attempted to interject, to diffuse the tension and steer the show back to less combustible ground. But Sykes, fevered in her resolve, spoke over the interruption. She demanded that Behar acknowledge the possibility that censorship, even if well-intended, can stifle voices that push toward greater understanding. At that moment, the studio's usual decorum cracked, emotions eclipsed protocol. The audience, muffled on standby, sensed that they were witnessing something raw and unscripted. The laughter track fell silent. Applause died before it could begin. The other hosts exchanged glances, some shifting uneasily. This was more than a televised debate. It had become a turning point, a spectacle of clashing worldviews over what humor should or should not do. Wanda's voice echoed in the moment, fierce and unrestrained. Behar tried to pivot, leaning back, softening her tone, attempting a more conciliatory phrasing. She acknowledged that perhaps comedic boundaries are contested. But the momentum had shifted. Wanda, riding the surge of conviction, pressed on. She refused partial retreats. Every acknowledgement felt insufficient unless it recognized the core tenet, that humor must be allowed to transgress, to provoke, to unsettly even at the cost of discomfort. At one point, Behar launched an argument that certain topics demand sensitivity because of their historical weight. Sykes countered that precisely because of that weight, scrutiny and satire are essential, that ignoring or immunizing those subjects can ossify injustice. She argued that humor is not frivolous, it's often the knife that reveals the wound. Her words landed with gravity, and for a moment the studio fell into silent tension, as if absorbing the weight of her claim. The exchange climaxed when Sykes, voice resonant, told Behar that she would not accept a blanket veto on comedic exploration. She said that to shut doors on what can be joked about is to declare that some truths are unapproachable. That declaration, in her framing, was a concession to fear. Behar, stung, attempted retort, but Wanda's posture, a shoulder squared, tone firm, conveyed she had seized the moral high ground. In the moments afterward, the hosts attempted to de-escalate. They shifted to a segment break, laughter and commercials struck. But the aftershocks were palpable. The studio air seemed charged. Viewers in their living rooms adjusted the confrontation. Online commentators raced to dissect who won, who lost. But beyond that, the clash lingered as more than a fight over jokes. It was a fight over who gets to decide what can be said. Following the broadcast, social media lit up with clips of the clash. Some cheered Sykes' assertiveness, praising her for defending artistic freedom. Others criticized her for overreaching, for dismissing the harm comedic words can do. Talk shows and op-eds dissected the moment, parsing every phrase. The divide over comedy, responsibility, and boundary resurfaced in public discourse, propelled by Wanda's eruption. In interviews afterward, Wanda framed the incident not as a feud but as a moment of necessary confrontation. She said she respected Behar, but disagreed vehemently with any posture that tips toward censorship. She reiterated that dialogue must include discomfort, that art must risk transgression. In doing so, she reframed her eruption as a principled stand, not a personal attack. The clash between Sykes and Behar on The View will not soon fade from memory. It stands as a vivid illustration of the tensions inherent in comedy, in public discourse, in the balance between free expression and empathy. Wanda's eruption was dramatic, but it was also a mirror held up to our cultural moment, asking who gets to decide the limits of speech, and reminding us that when these limits are challenged, the fallout is loud, charged, and resonant. In the days that followed, producers from The View reportedly reached out to both Wanda Sykes and Joy Behar, hoping to mend the public perception of discord between them. While no formal apology was demanded or offered, insiders suggested that a tense backstage conversation took place. Wanda, still firm in her convictions, stood by her comments but admitted that the moment got hotter than intended. Joy, known for her humor and bluntness, admitted she hadn't expected Wanda to take such a strong stance, but she respected her passion. The two women agreed that spirited debate was part of the show's legacy, even when tempers flare. Online, fans dissected the confrontation frame by frame, quoting lines, analyzing tone, and assigning blame. Some saw Wanda as a voice of artistic freedom. Others viewed Joy as a necessary moral compass in a time of social sensitivity. Comment sections became miniature battlegrounds, echoing the very debate the two women had. Hashtags like #Wanda vs Joy and #Comedy Freedom trended for days, turning what was initially a studio clash into a larger national conversation about where the line between expression and offense should lie. Late-night hosts couldn't resist weighing in either. Some poked fun at the incident, while others used it to reflect on the growing tension between comedians and cancel culture. One host jokingly said, "Even The View needs a referee now," while another pointed out that Wanda's eruption might have been exactly what comedy needed, as someone refusing to bow to the fear of being misunderstood. The laughter from audiences was mixed with reflection. The moment had clearly struck a chord far beyond daytime television. Wanda's team released a statement emphasizing her long-standing commitment to honest comedy. The statement reminded fans that she had built her career on speaking uncomfortable truths wrapped in humor, and that censoring those truths would strip comedy of its purpose. It concluded with an ode to free dialogue: "Disagreement isn't danger, it's democracy in motion." The message resonated widely, especially among artists and creators who have often faced similar scrutiny. Joy Behar, meanwhile, addressed the issue in her signature wry fashion. On a later episode, she quipped, "If Wanda and I can't argue, then what's left for television?" The comment turned laughs, but she followed it with a more serious note, acknowledging that her and Wanda's exchange reflected the cultural crossroads society faces. She admitted that she sometimes errs on the side of caution but respects comedians who take risks. Her candor softened public criticism, showing that even disagreement can coexist with mutual respect. When Wanda returned to another talk show a week later, she was asked about the incident once more. Rather than rekindle the conflict, she smiled and said, "That's what happens when two passionate women talk about things that matter." She elaborated that heated dialogue shouldn't be feared but harnessed. "We're not enemies," she said. "We're mirrors showing each other what we believe, even if it's uncomfortable." The crowd applauded, sensing her sincerity and her desire to move the conversation forward. Cultural critics began writing essays about the Sykes-Behar moment, comparing it to past television debates that define generational shifts. Some drew parallels to when comedians like George Carlin or Richard Pryor pushed the limits of acceptable speech. They argued that the modern climate, though more aware of harm, risks smothering satire's critical power. Others countered that laughter must evolve with empathy. The clash between Sykes and Behar became a metaphor for this ongoing cultural recalibration. Within comedy circles, the incident sparked renewed discussions about self-censorship. Many comedians expressed gratitude toward Wanda for publicly standing her ground. One comic wrote online, "She said what most of us think every night before going on stage." Open mic forums and podcast hosts debated whether comedy was becoming too careful, too filtered. Some praised Wanda for defending artistic integrity, others warned that dismissing social awareness as censorship was short-sighted. Still, the debate thrived alive with the friction Wanda had championed. Fans of The View noted that subsequent episodes seemed slightly more measured. The hosts, while maintaining their usual energy, appeared cautious not to let conversations spiral into personal conflict. Producers reportedly adjusted the pacing of discussions, ensuring more balanced airtime. Yet some viewers missed the rawness of the Sykes-Behar exchange, calling it real television, unscripted, human, and unapologetically messy. Ratings even spiked temporarily, proving that audiences crave authenticity, even when it's uncomfortable. Wanda later mentioned in a comedy special that the event had inspired new material. With her trademark irony, she joked, "If I can survive arguing with Joy Behar on live TV, I can survive anything." The crowd roared with laughter. Beneath the humor, though, her routine explored the serious undertones of that experience, the fragility of open conversation in an era of quick outrage. Her bit about walking on eggshells and steel-toe boots captured both her frustration and resilience. Joy Behar, for her part, maintained good spirits. She told an interviewer that the exchange reminded her why she loves Lived Va, because you can't fake passion. She said that while she and Wanda might never fully agree, she respects any voice that fights for authenticity. Her response was surprisingly gracious and helped dispel rumors of lingering animosity. Behind the scenes, the two reportedly exchanged light-hearted messages, proving that heated debate doesn't have to end in hostility. Public perception of both women evolved after the incident. Wanda gained recognition not only as a comedian but as a spokesperson for creative courage. Joy reaffirmed her image as a sharp-minded veteran unafraid to challenge anyone, even peers she respects. Together, their clash reflected the spectrum of discourse, the fire of conviction meeting the discipline of empathy. It reminded viewers that disagreement, when handled with honesty, can illuminate shared truths. The broader media conversation expanded into classrooms, podcasts, and think pieces exploring the ethics of humor. Professors used clips from The View to discuss freedom of expression, while social commentators dissected how generational differences influence what people find acceptable. Wanda's eruption became a case study in communication, how intent, tone, and timing can amplify or distort meaning. Even critics who disagreed with her methods acknowledged the power of her message. By month's end, the frenzy began to cool, but the echo remained. Wanda and Joy both continued with their projects, yet that single exchange stayed embedded in pop culture's memory. It symbolized the tension between authenticity and caution, laughter and restraint. People continued referencing it whenever debates about cancel culture resurfaced. In hindsight, the moment wasn't just controversy, it was catalyst. Looking back, Wanda Sykes' eruption on The View stands as one of those rare televised confrontations that transcend entertainment. It wasn't about ego or insult, it was about the soul of dialogued self. How two perspectives, clashing fiercely, can ignite reflection across an entire nation. Whether one sides with Wanda's insistence on absolute freedom or Joy's appeal for thoughtful restraint, the exchange reminds us that progress often begins in discomfort. And sometimes, it takes a public eruption to remind society that silence is the greater risk.